From the heart of Orlando, Florida, the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski, and I am so excited for another show live here in beautiful Central Florida. The show that gets things done. The show that doesn't just want to talk about what special investigation or what Congress had to run their mouths about, but we really want to actually solve the problems that affect everybody's lives and not just complain and go to big government and say, oh, please tell us what to do about all of our life issues. One of those key issues is energy, and that's why I'm excited for today's show, because this program is not one that just says, hey, politics is the answer. This is a show that actually wants to find the doers, the people who are actually in the marketplace of idea and the marketplace of engineering. And so each Thursday on this program, we're going to do a science and innovation look, a look at tomorrow, today, and I think I'm going to dub it Science and You. That will be our series. It'll be Science and You. And in studio with me is my chief science advisor, theoretical physicist, Dr. Wei-Ping Yu.
Thank you, David, for having me again.
What do you think of that name, Science and You?
Well, rhymes.
Well, Dr. Yu has been my advocate and my advisor for unlocking some of the sacred cows of physics and energy, and today is going to be one of those jam-packed shows because with us today is the team behind Brillouin Energy. They are working on what they used to call cold fusion back in the 80s, and everybody said, oh, no, it's not possible. It's not cold. That's one thing. It's not fusion. That's another thing. But it is a form of low-energy nuclear reaction, and we have the team behind Brillouin with us today, Mr. Robert George and Mr. Robert Goddess. How you guys?
How are you?
Great.
How you guys
Great
doing?
to be here.
Good. Very good. So glad to speak with you. And your media rep, James Martinez, has spoken highly of your work, and so I've been looking forward to have this time with you. And I know Dr. Yu is as well, because we don't want to just rely on top-down, winners and losers being chosen by bureaucrats in Washington that typically are connected to the guys they're trying to play referee with, right? We want to actually look for the people, the misfits, the dissidents, the contrarians that are really looking to solve the solution with their own skin in the game. And that sounds like what you guys are doing with Brillouin, Mr. George.
Absolutely.
So briefly, tell us a little bit about your product. You guys are still in this kind of a startup phase. You've been raising funds, and I want the average person to understand briefly what the product is that you're trying to bring into the market. It's highly disruptive, and it is somewhat like a form of low-energy nuclear reaction.
That's correct. It uses hydrogen as a nuclear fuel, but it's completely safe with no radiation. We've got prototypes operating in our lab currently, and we're scaling them up. The next round of financing should allow us to bring it to commercialization. Brillouin Energy has already signed licenses for distribution in South Korea, Canada, and Australia and New Zealand. And we will be introducing boilers that will be able to heat your house and do your domestic hot water, and then we will scale it up so that it can do industrial heating and on from there to generate electricity.
So your focus right now is on the home appliance use, right? To be able to heat home water use, right?
Correct. These are boilers.
Okay. So briefly explain to the average Joe who's saying, I'm interested in being clean energy. I want renewable energy. I'm not sold on maybe this Green New Deal where you're going to spend $80 trillion to do it. What can I do if I want to look into your product? Tell me why a clean energy consumer would want to use your product.
Well, this will be the first boiler that you can buy that'll give you a return on your investment because there will be no fuel costs. We're splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. We're using the hydrogen as a nuclear fuel. It has an energy density 100 times higher than your current gas or oil-fired boilers.
So where does this term nuclear come into the picture? I think the average person probably thinks of nuclear with scary, they get scary thoughts of Fukushima or something. So tell people, what is the nuclear reaction component that's taking place in this product that's coming to market?
Well, Robert Goddess has been working on this for almost 20 years, and I met him 10 years ago, and we started working together. So I'll let him take it from here.
Sure, Mr. Goddess or Dr. Goddess.
So, yeah. Well, no, it's just
okay.
Mr. is fine.
Okay.
Don't like to stand on much of anything other than the technology that I'm building.
Sure.
So that we're building, the team here at Brillouin Energy is phenomenal. But the reason it's nuclear and the reason that the hot fusion people who say, oh, it's not fusion, but it is nuclear, is because it's actually a multi-step process. But the first step before anything happens, the first step is actually endothermic. And what that means is kind of a big word, but what it means is that you have to actually put energy into the system, sort of like a spark plug in a car. It's a tiny amount of energy that then ignites the fuel-air mixture in the cylinder and pushes the cylinder down to turn your wheels. You have to put energy into the LENR system, and our hypothesis says that what's happening is that first step of energy is converting energy into mass. Like, well, but wait, nuclear energy is converting mass into energy, not energy into mass. And that's true. Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. A tiny bit of mass yields an immense amount of energy. But what makes this actually controllable is understanding that the first step is taking a little bit of energy, we'll call it 0.8 units of energy, to take a proton plus an electron and turn it into a neutron. And a lot of people will say, oh, that'll never work. In fact, I had a researcher, I got something called a TAP, a Technology Assistance Package from Pacific Northwest National Labs. And they said, what's the simplest thing that you want to simulate? I said, that's what I want to simulate. Show that when you put a proton and an electron, which are some of the basic building blocks of matter, into a box, you make the box small enough, the uncertainty of position becomes so small that the uncertainty of energy becomes large, and it'll actually turn that energy into the mass of a neutron. We said, that will never work. I said, okay, prove it. I said, fine. He came back 3 weeks later. He said, no, actually, that works. I said, yeah, I know it works because my experiments work, and this is the process that I'm driving. So it takes energy. You're saying, well, but you're putting energy in to create mass. Where's the energy come from? So the energy comes from the fact that it takes 0.8 units of energy to create the neutron, which also gets rid of the positive charge of the proton. Once that happens, the energy is very, very cold, and it gives it a very large cross-section, which means the probability that it's going to interact with another hydrogen ion that can now move into that location where the neutron formed, and it will bind with it. And the binding energy, so you're minus 0.8 units to create the neutron, you're plus 2.2 units when you form what's called a deuteron. But that's just the first step. The next step, if a deuteron interacts with a newly formed neutron to create what's called a triton, which is a tritium nucleus, it releases 6.2 units of energy. And if a triton interacts with the low-energy neutron to form something called quatrium, then that's a fairly unstable. And initially people said, oh, that couldn't possibly be it. Several years ago, so there's a website called the National Nuclear Data Center, the NNDC, located at Brookhaven National Labs, nndc.bnl.gov. And they used to say the half-life was 4.6 MeV, which is just it's called a yoctosecond, which was Dr. Yu may be familiar with that term.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And they actually removed that from the website after several discussions with a number of people at the NNDC. So when you go from tritium plus a neutron to helium-4, because when you form it at a very low energy level, it actually undergoes a beta decay, you get 20.6 units of energy out. So you put in a total of 2.4 units of energy, and your net out is actually about 27 units of energy from the formation of a helium-4 out of 4 protons.
So this sounds kind of like a form of transmutation.
It's exactly what it is.
Doctor, it's very similar to what Dr. Yu has predicted was possible with this type of nuclear reaction, given his understanding of the atom. On the other side of this commercial break, we're going to get into what this looks like for real life when this comes into the industry and disrupts a lot of paradigms that we currently have. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in a moment. And welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice, the program that doesn't want to just talk about fake news, but wants to actually solve problems real time, live on radio here. And I'm speaking here with the team behind Brillouin, the new group that has started to introduce low-energy nuclear reaction. Currently in the general public, when people think of nuclear, they think of Fukushima-type, really clunky machines that are very dangerous and highly fragile to problems. And then if they're more involved with the topic of nuclear energy, they might think about nuclear fusion, which are these big hot chambers that seem to never get past 30 years down the road. They're always saying 30 years we'll get it, in 30 years we'll get it. Dr. Yu and I believe those hot thermonuclear reactors aren't going to go anywhere because they're not going to produce more excess heat than the energy that's put in. But I'm speaking here with the team with Brillouin, and they're saying with their type of low energy nuclear reaction using hydrogen as a fuel source in a kind of tabletop environment, you can get excess energy that they're seeing already in their lab, right?
Absolutely.
We've developed 4 boilers, and we've had 2 of them operating down at SRI International under the auspices of 2 of the top scientists in LENR, Dr. Michael McCubry and Dr. Francis Tanzella. They've been operating our boilers independently for several years, and they've validated and verified all our results. Currently, we're getting 2.6, 2.7 times more energy out of our systems than we're putting in, which verifies that, in fact, it is a viable technology. We're in the process of scaling up, as I said earlier. We have both an electrolytic system and a gas phase system, but they're both based on the same technology. And it's really exciting, and this is going to revolutionize the energy market.
Is hydrogen, that's the fuel source, is that something that you think the mass market would be able to afford as an energy fuel if this takes off?
Basically, they'll have a vessel of water, and they can take a solar cell, and they can frack the water break the hydrogen down the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and just use the hydrogen for the fuel. You're talking about a tiny, tiny amount of hydrogen. If you know one of those small fire extinguishers that you keep in your home that you put on the wall behind your dryer or something,
yeah,
a container that size would heat your home for 10 years.
Oh, okay. So this is under your system, what you're designing here.
Yes.
Well, I want to turn it back over to Dr. Robert Goddess, and I'm going to let Dr. Yu, our chief science advisor here at A Neighbor's Choice, ask Dr. Goddess some few questions here.
Okay. Dr. Goddess, I think it's very brilliant when you use a nuclear reaction instead of use nuclear fusion. Do you know? Can you explain why you use this term? Which I like that term better.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm talking about. So there's a controversial about the nuclear fusion, right? So low temperature, room temperature versus hot, explosive fusion. So I noticed so you use a nuclear reaction in your term instead of a nuclear fusion. But in reality, based on your explanation, it has a fusion effect. So I thought, wow, that's a very clever way to avoid controversial. Yeah.
So it's controversial because hot fusion, which has received hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, overcomes the Coulomb barrier. You've got two positive charges, and they force them together until they get close enough to stick, and then it releases an enormous amount of energy. It is very dangerous radiation, either fast neutrons or gamma rays, both of which are deadly.
Right.
And that is what much of the physics community considers to be fusion, which is why we don't say we're doing fusion.
Right.
But the fact is that we start off with hydrogen and we wind up with helium. So a rose by any other name is still a rose, just the same, because of all the controversy. It's the best explanation is what we call our hypothesis, which is a controlled electron capture reaction.
Okay. Yeah. So just for the audience, knowledge, in order for fusion occurs, you have to fuse two like-charged particle proton together. That theoretically require the energy, harder.
Oh, in
the center of the sun. Okay. So that's why it's so dangerous.
Right.
In order to create this fuse together, produce the results as helium. But this technology, that's very interesting. You said that you use a 0.8 unit of energy. So basically you use hydrogen, right? As a proton produced through hydrogen fuel. Is that right?
Yes.
And
proton, can come from anywhere. Yeah.
Did you get this kind of question to say, when electron, when the atomic model say electron always orbiting, constantly in motion around protons, right? So now
absolutely,
you are propose a new concept, say you let the electron and the proton actually form them together without create the matter-antimatter explosion, right? Okay, and form a neutron. Of course, we have a neutron, right? So I know the results is correct, and I have a theory to explain this one too. So by forming neutron, and then you said it started with you use a neutron can go through what is hydrogen or go through you said interact with what?
So it goes from
become neutralize a particle. Yeah.
Right. You start with 4 protons. You turn 3 of them into neutrons.
Okay.
And then protium is atomic unit 1.
Okay.
You've got 1 proton.
Right.
Deuterium is 2 units. You have 1 proton and 1 neutron. Tritium is 3. Tritium, triton, is 2 neutrons and 1 proton. And then quatrium is 4 neutrons, but that 4th neutron, or that three neutrons, 1 proton. That 3rd one, it makes it very unstable, and it eventually emits an electron, which is what was captured to turn it into a neutron. And when it does that 3rd neutron becomes a proton, but it's already within the strong nuclear force range, and it binds, and it's that nuclear binding energy that comes out in the form of heat. And it comes out in the form of heat because it's already below an energy level where it can emit a photon, which in a hot fusion reaction, that photon comes out as a gamma ray, and it'll shred your DNA. It's very dangerous. But because it's taking place already at a much lower energy level, you're like, well, we're designing to run around 700 degrees Celsius top end. And it's like, wow, that's like really, really hot, which it is. It's very, very hot, but it's actually substantially less than, the unit, is called an EV. It's very warm, but it's just heat.
That's right.
It's not the only photons that are coming off of there is infrared, and it'll warm you up. It'll boil your cup of tea. You can make as many cups of tea as you want, and when you drink it, you can then make some more cups of tea.
So there's no dangerous radiation detected in this process for the listener.
The closest thing to radiation beyond heat is something called low-level X-rays, but it takes place inside of a steel tube, and so even those low-level X-rays are turned into heat.
Either contained. Yes.
How big is the device that's planned for home use? This water heater.
So that'll be up to the boiler manufacturer. When I bought my house in 1996, I converted it to hydronic heating, and so I got a pretty small one. You can get bigger ones that use a plastic exhaust pipe. The contractor put in one that uses a metal exhaust pipe. It's not as efficient, but that's really up to the boiler manufacturer. They could use just 18-inch long tubes as the hydrogen hot tube, and that can probably produce enough energy to heat your entire house.
For how long?
Basically,
how long would that? Yeah.
So the tube itself, we have, the only thing that's absolutely certain, I like to say the only thing that's absolutely certain is history. So the history that we have, the longest running system, catalyst rod we have now has more than 1 year of runtime. It's actually been running for more than a year.
Non-stopping?
Took it out. I'm sorry?
It's a non-stopping running for 1 year, the longest run?
Yeah, it has 1 year. The tube itself is actually more than 2 years old.
Okay.
But it's actually been running. So if you've got a aircraft, they have something called engine hours. So the engine hour meter on this shows that it's been running for more than a year of actual operation.
How often do you put the fuel in?
Hydrogen fuel in, right?
Yeah. How often do you have to provide the hydrogen fuel?
So right now, what we have is we call it stop flow. We can close all the valves, and because these are development units, the hydrogen leaks out very, very slowly. So if we close all the valves, in an hour, it drops, 1 or 2 psi. It's not a large volume of hydrogen gas in there. So we typically leave the regulator set at 1 pressure, and we just let it run at that. Theoretically, the amount of hydrogen that is used, if you were to build a power plant that could power all 5 boroughs of New York City, say, or the majority of the entire state of Florida, including everybody's car, assuming they made all the cars electric, it would take you several seconds to produce enough helium to fill a party balloon. So you think about how quickly you put a party balloon over the end of your exhaust pipe, you turn over the engine, and before the engine even starts to warm up, the balloon's going to break. There's so much gas that has come out. The helium, which is the exhaust gas from this process, you power the entire state of Florida, it would take several seconds to fill a party balloon with the helium that's created. So tiny amount. A 6 ounce cup of water. There's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen in every water molecule. If you were to run the electrolysis process, just a solar panel could turn that into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen in that cup of water would be enough to power the entire state of Florida for more than a day. That's how efficient it is, for how energy dense hydrogen as a nuclear fuel is.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, but on the other side, we're going to conclude with final thoughts about how this will impact our need for clean energy and what the resistance may be in bringing this kind of technology to the market. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in a moment. A Neighbor's Choice Radio is back, and I'm talking to Brillouin Energy. BrillouinEnergy.com is the name of their website if you want to check them out. And I have the president of Brillouin, and I also have their chief technical officer. And Mr. George, I wanted to go back to you. Just kind of let's bring this home for the average person as we kind of started at the beginning. People want clean energy. They want renewable energy. Let's get some of the kind of practical things people can look forward to with this. What do you think is the time frame to be able to get this to market so people can be able to buy a home unit that will have a low energy nuclear reaction, safe and affordable for the average home?
That's an excellent question. Brillouin Energy is working with BEC.Ltd, BEC Limited, to do the next round of financing. You can either go to BEC.Ltd or www.bec.ltd. And you can see the video on Brillouin Energy's website that explains the significance of this technology to our planet. But once we close on this next round of financing, we're basically projecting 24 to 36 months before our licensed partners will have beta units that they can put out into test in their customer sites. And for the home heating, you'll be able to go to, for example, a Train or a Carrier or one of those HVAC companies, because this is going to revolutionize their market. And they'll have slightly larger heat exchangers, but this will be a boiler where you don't have to have a chimney, and the fuel basically could be 10 years at a time, and it'll be self-sustaining that whole time. All you need is plug it into the wall, so that, just like your oil burner, so that you can ignite the thing, and the thermostat will cycle it when you need it. So it's really safe technology.
What's your estimated cost to the consumer for this unit that you're projecting?
This boiler should be about a third more than your current oil-fired or gas boiler. But as I said, because especially for new construction, you won't need a chimney, and your fuel costs go away. You can actually calculate the return on your investment. Our calculations is that your boiler will be paid for in less than 2 years, so it'll pay for itself.
So you're saying a third of the cost of a conventional boiler for?
No.
What was that?
A third more. It'll be a third more than your current boiler.
A third more. Okay, I see. Dr. Yu, any final questions?
We're really excited that we got a chance to talk to you. We're looking forward to closing on this next round of financing and bringing this product to market.
Well, very good. Folks, it's been a pleasure getting to meet your team, and I hope that we can hear many more positive things about your efforts in the future, because we certainly do need low-cost, clean energy so we don't have to be fighting in these wars for oil, and we don't have to have an $80 trillion Green New Deal.
Amen to that.
Well, thanks again, guys. BrillouinEnergy.com. Check them out and get involved if you're interested in helping see real energy revolution in our country. We'll be right back after these short break, and we'll be with our new guest, Andrew Kern, who is the CEO of CiRCE Institute. We'll be right back in just a second. In a fight for the soul of our human civilization, you're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, your political exorcist, a person cutting through all the fat, all the noise, and all the confusion, separating the wheat from the chaff, as we are called to do by the master of history, Jesus Christ. And that's what we do on this program each day, now Monday through Thursday, here on News Radio 93.1 WFLA. And I'm pleased to be joined with a good friend of mine, Andrew Kern, the president of the CiRCE Institute, which is a leading advocate and developer of classical education, which is a great form of homeschooling and private schooling in America today. Andrew, thanks for coming on the program.
Honored to be here. Thank you, David.
And it's good to hear from you again. And I have here in studio with me my chief science advisor, Dr. Wei-Ping Yu. He's a theoretical physicist, and I just want to have a nice little educational summit here on what is the state of our educational system here in America. And you have been working years now in the field of classical schooling. So give us a little bit of an introduction for those people here on this station and around the world about classical schooling. What's it all about?
Yeah, well, that is a good question. It's about being human is the easiest way to put it. I think what we've seen in the last century in particular in the U.S., but over the last, in increasing speed, last few centuries has been an emphasis more and more on children being productive cogs of an economy or hard to know what else they think of, citizens sometimes, but very little time spent thinking about what it means to be human. And the classical tradition and the Christian tradition, of course, prioritize that because better humans make better workers, if nothing else. It's better for the economy to be human. But even if they didn't, it would still be better to be fully human to the extent that we can attain it. So that's what it's about. One way I like to define it for brevity's sake is it's the cultivation of wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on the true, the good, and the beautiful.
Well, that's very good. Well, there's nothing very beautiful about what's being churned out into most public schools. Unfortunately, there are good people within the system. I know many of them, but the system, the curriculum, and the way it's designed, it produces an ugly aesthetic, as you can see with the results every day with people at each other's throats. If you have a hat on that says Make America Great Again, you get violently attacked by people who are in their 30s and 40s. These are products of public schooling. So obviously the worldview behind this kind of schooling is producing violence and bitterness and anger. And I want to produce a kind of schooling system in America that will be producing beauty, self-restraint, self-reflection, and wisdom, right? And it sounds like what you guys are trying to do is similar to that. You're getting into the classics, the texts, that people used to read at the founding, that made America great to begin with, and you're trying to bring this to the next generation. I think this is very important, and I also want to ask you, where do you see private schooling and homeschooling? Do you see that becoming more of a mainstream, mass market, to use an economic term, option for everyday families?
I don't know if I do. I see them as being widely available right now, that anybody who can afford it can go to a private school, and people who can't afford a private school can easily do homeschooling, or I shouldn't say easily, but can do homeschooling. And I think that people who don't want their kids in a public school have alternatives to it. There's even charter schools that are altering the public school sphere, but I don't know if I see them, how much I see them growing from this point forward, just because of trends. I think that generally speaking, human beings like to be part of the accepted system, and even our Declaration says that people don't want to overthrow the established order until the grievances are very great. And I don't think that most people in America connect the transformation of society as it's happening directly to the public schools, and I suspect that those who do are not upset by it. But I think among religious people, specifically Christians, of course, but I think Muslims and other religious people are very, very, well, put it this way, their ideas aren't welcome in the public setting. They're not legal in the public school setting, so they prefer to have more influence over their own children and protect them from what they think is a harmful system of thought. So I think among Christians, maybe there will be more growth. But then I also have some cautions. I think homeschooling right now has become noticed, and I think that the media is gearing up right now to promote regulation of homeschooling. So that'll be interesting. I think the next election is going to have a pretty profound impact on educational freedom, depending on who gets elected. So we'll see.
On the other extreme,
not very good at predicting the future since it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, on the other extreme, I've seen a lot of secular families homeschooling too, and there's also a rise in the unschooling movement. What do you think of that? The unschooling philosophy, the idea of letting the child direct the educational, choices and the.
Yeah, it just means so many different things to so many different people. I look at life as there's two different tendencies that underlie us as human beings. One is the older brother in the prodigal son, which is wanting to obey the rules and stay with the system and be rigid and stay with have things controlled. And the other is the prodigal tendency to wander and the it's the one and the many, if you like, the multitude or diversity versus unity, all those things, they're always in tension. And I think that there's a certain personality that's always going to be inclined toward toward unschooling. And I think there's a personality that's always going to be inclined toward rigorous, rigid schooling. But I think most people just wander between the two day to day. And so I don't believe there are very many pure unschoolers. But probably those who are pure unschoolers would say I've just misrepresented them. So it's one of those things that's really interesting. It's fun to watch the energy flow. There'll always be that element. But it's just a part. It's a personality and a condition that's a part of what will always be there if we have a free society. I think that people who are disposed that way should be allowed to teach that way. I don't think that children by nature educate themselves. I think that they certainly learn a lot, but I don't think they get. There was only one Plato, put it that way.
Hi, Andrew. Excuse me, Andrew. Actually, I had concerning about homeschooling. Which is different than private schooling, homeschooling before. But my concept, my, worldview completely changed after I doing outreach program, go to homeschool, to teach science and to give them lectures. I found that the people are very self-driven, very eager to learn, and very, very responsible. So I noticed one of the advantages about homeschooling is, it's called competence-based learning instead of time-based in the public school. In public school,
I agree with you.
Right? You just say rushing the time from one class to another class, and without human input, human feedback. But in the homeschooling, parents or the teacher, based on the child's interest and based on the child's pace, that's the most important. So I found
I don't disagree with anything you said. I wasn't commenting on homeschooling, but on unschooling.
Unschooling, that's something I have not thought about. Yeah.
Yeah. And let me just say, and to affirm what you're saying, I can assure you, I'm 55 right now, I can guarantee you, I can't prove it, but I can guarantee you that if when I was 13 years old, my mother had got up and said, before she went off to work, she was a nurse, if she had got up and said, today, read these books and do this homework, I would have got more done on my own with no regulation and nobody supervising me in 2 hours. I would have learned more in 2 hours than I learned probably in a week in the school I went to as a kid.
Totally agree with you.
Awful. Okay.
So you're talking to a rocket scientist. He agrees with you, huh?
I learned more after I graduate, get my PhD. Okay, during my free time, learn more than my over 24 years schooling in my life.
Yeah. And to confirm that, Andrew, I learned more in the library at my university than I ever did in any of the classrooms because there was so much more interesting things to direct myself to.
Well, the only qualification I want to make for all three of us is that we could do that because we had been taught how to think by somebody somewhere. And my mother and my father, in my church, there was a lot of thought going on in my life. And so I was comfortable with books. But kids who are in environments where not much thought is taking place and books aren't, they would not do that. The other 8 hours I probably would have gone out causing trouble in my neighborhood.
We're going to leave it right there, Andrew. CiRCEInstitute.org, CiRCE Institute.org. Go there and learn about the revolutionary power of classical education, folks. It's time to renew our minds. This is A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you next Monday.
Hi, this is David Gornoski, founder of A Neighbor's Choice. A Neighbor's Choice is sponsored by people just like you, making weekly or monthly contributions to support the development of this show, which is dedicated to introducing Jesus' personhood revolution to the broader public. Visit www.aneighborschoice.com, click on Contribute, and start your monthly pledge today. We appreciate